Hi everyone, welcome to Under the Microscope. My name is Pranoti, I'm your host, and today under the microscope we have Ipek Efe, who is a PhD student at the ETH Zurich, which is in Switzerland, not so far away from me. So, hi Ipek, welcome to Under the Microscope. How are you doing?
Hi, Pranati. Thanks a lot for having me today. I'm very happy to be here. I'm doing pretty good. Summer can't be bad.
Please tell me, what are you doing? What is your research? I mean, I don't mean to ask you what you're doing in life. I mean, of course, I would be interested in knowing that as well. But what are you doing at ETH Zurich? Tell me your research.
All right. So I'm a doctoral student. I just finished my second year, and my research is focusing on some materials called ferroelectric materials. And that sounds a bit unfamiliar, but actually it's a very familiar concept. So you probably know the magnets, right? The ones that we stick into our fridges. So these materials are called as ferromagnetic. So they have this magnetic field inside, kind of. And there's these two poles, north and south. So we probably played, all of us, as a kid, with these two sides. So this is a polarization, but in the magnetic side. But with the ferroelectric, we basically have a very similar, like analogous or same concept, but instead of the magnetic field, we have electric charges. So in these materials, spontaneously, so naturally, we have positive charges and negative charges separated in the unit cell or in the material. So one side is positive, the other side is negative, just like one side is north and one side is south in the magnetics. And so these materials have this charge separation naturally inside, and then they can be useful for many things. So my research is focusing on growing this material in the thin film format. And how thin I'm talking about. So usually my films are like, let's say, can be 1 unit cell, which is like 2 atomic layers, up to, 10 or 20, 30 unit cell, but usually in the nanometer range, like not more than 50 nanometers usually. So I'm growing this kind of ferroelectric materials, like the crystal growth and in the thin film form. And then I'm trying to improve their properties and like develop, insert some new functionalities inside and this kind of things.
Okay, interesting. So, what kind of materials are we talking about here? Like iron or like what?
Yeah. So my materials are like I'm focusing on oxides. So it's actually ceramic. And my material usually have like 3 or 4 different types of atoms, and it's a solid material, so it's crystal structure. So specifically it's called as metal oxides. There's usually 2 metals inside, like for example, bismuth ferrite, bismuth iron oxide. So there is bismuth, iron, and oxygen. So usually the oxygen is always common, and the first 2 atoms can change, and there can be even 4 different types of, or 5 actually, depending on how complex you want to go, or how different properties you want to have. But you probably, maybe some people heard about, PZT, the piezoelectric material.
Yes.
That's also a part of this family. And then in PZT, we have lead, zirconium, titanium, and oxygen. So it's the same, very similar crystal structure, but just the different atoms inside. Yeah, if you heard about PZT, you probably heard about piezoelectrics. So piezoelectrics, just to give it a small recap, piezoelectrics are the materials where there's this electric polarization, just like in the ferroelectrics, happens. So the charges are separated, and there's an internal electric field, and it is coupled to the structure mechanically. So when I press on it or when I put a pressure on it, I can induce some internal electric field or polarization. And vice versa. When I put an electric field, I can make a change in the material. I can make it extend or compress and like stuff like this. And actually, all ferroelectrics are also piezoelectrics. So these are coupled to each other.
Oh, wow.
So ferroelectrics are actually very cool because they combine different things within themselves. Like all of them are piezoelectrics. So the mechanical structure is coupled to this electric order, and they are also photovoltaic, so they can get they can absorb sunlight, and then they can like create this electric field. Or at the same time, they are also pyroelectric, which means I'm talking about a lot of electric stuff. And then there's the first part of the word, which basically tells you the energy type, the resource, energy resource. So pyro is like for the heat and temperature. So we can also control this material by using temperature change. And they're also ferroelastic, which comes again with this mechanical structure and the electric polarization coupling.
Oh my God.
We talked about a lot of ferros.
Oh my God. Oh my God. This is so cool. And I'm still stuck on the point that you mentioned. So it's like ceramic. So are we talking about you being the witch who is making the ceramics electric or magnetic?
Yes, exactly. So these are ceramics as a class of materials, and then we usually call them in our field as electroceramics. So they have this electrical functionality, like piezoelectrics or ferroelectrics. So because they have this electrical functionality, it's pretty cool. Actually, we can use these materials. Like, for example, there's so many applications, but one part is like sensors. So, we can give the sunlight or another like light, or we can have some kind of a mechanical, pressure sensor or mechanical sensor or temperature sensor. And because there is this electric component coupled to it, all of these different energy sources creates this electric response, so that we can insert this material in our electronics and then have all the circuit and devices on top of them. So that's actually pretty cool because they are pretty controllable. So we can control them basically with so many different ways, and that of course opens a lot of applications.
Oh wow. This is so I could ask you so many questions. I could just continue on this and learn more and more. This is like my personal crash course into ferroelectrics or electric ceramics or electrifying ceramics. Sorry, I will stop myself now. But yeah, okay. How did this happen, right? How did you end up in Zurich working on these uber cool materials? Like how did this happen? Tell me about your journey so far.
Sure. So I'm from Turkey. So I did my primary and high school in Turkey, and then my bachelor Turkey as well in Sabancı University in material science in Istanbul.
In Istanbul. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I finished my bachelor's. So in my bachelor's, I worked on a slightly different topic. So I was working on luminescent materials, so the materials that glow in the dark, and again some ceramics. But then I had an internship. So I think for me, my interest started with that internship. So I did a summer research internship at CERN, so in Geneva. And there I was working on a material called bismuth iron oxide. So this bismuth ferrite, we call it. This bismuth iron oxide is a ferroelectric material. But at the same time, it also has a magnetic order. And these two things are coupled to each other. So it's possible to control the magnetism by using electric field, or control the electric polarization by using magnetic field.
Okay.
That's pretty useful because, for example, in our daily lives, we have these magnetic memories, right? In our computers, these hard disks and so. Memory devices are magnetic. And then to switch them, we need to have a small magnetic field. So to switch means that storing information in them. And creating magnetic field is very costly, because we need to have a very high electric current, and then it costs a lot of energy to us. And the cool thing about this bismuth iron oxide is because there is this electric and magnetic order is coupled, we can switch this magnetism from north to south, or this, we can store the information by using only a small electric field. And because we don't use current, we don't use so much electricity, we don't lose so much to the, heating up with the current and all this resistance and stuff. So that's why these materials are very promising candidates for future energy efficient electronics. And when I was working on this material in my summer internship, I was very interested because that sounded very cool. And then afterwards, when I applied for my master's, I already kind of knew what I was interested in. And in ETH Zurich, in the master's program, we are supposed to do 3 research projects. So 1 big one, but 2 small ones. So I did several projects on this field, both computational and experimental. And then I decided that I like this area a lot. These materials are super cool, and this is a very fastly developing field. So it's relatively a young field, but it's super fastly improving and getting popular. And I think there's so many potential that is waiting to be discovered. And then because I liked it so much, I was like, I want to do a PhD on it. And then I continued. Now I'm doing an experimental research on ferroelectrics.
Oh, that is so cool. That's quite a journey you've had. And there are so many interesting projects that you mentioned that you're working on. So now I want to know, please don't hate me, one research project that you're most proud of, or the most fun or quirky one. And please tell me about it in super simple words, okay? In the section we call In Other Words.
All right. So I think the one that the most proud of, they're all very fun. I like all of them. But I think I can talk about my current research because that's the one that is still developing and it's still like super new and exciting. So I talked about how great are this ferroelectrics material, like ferroelectrics. But usually there is like a limitation of them or something to solve or develop. And the problem with this ferroelectrics, or let's say the challenge, is when we use these materials, like for example, I put them in my device and I use them, I turn it on and off, and then I store information in them. And first few cycles, it's fine. So first few times, it's okay. It's not even first hundreds and thousands times, it's okay. But once we start using them for million times, using them means that storing a single information, for example, or, opening and closing, or, putting an electric in the current, the circuit or not. And then once we start using them more and more, so after like a million or billion cycle, then they kind of lose their functionality. So we cannot control this polarization anymore. And that's called as fatigue, so material fatigues. And then that's like one of the biggest challenges, or, but one of the biggest things to solve before we put these things in our devices. And why this fatigue happening actually? Because talking about crystals, so atoms ordered in a structure, and then of course, in real life, nothing is perfect. So these crystals always have some defects, which means that, missing atoms or other kind of imperfections in a way in the structure. Right. And because these imperfections kind of starts, pinning the polarization, they act against us, so we cannot control anymore. This fatigue happens. And so solve this problem, actually, we need to look at the crystal, right? Because we need to get rid of these defects. And there is actually one crystal called as Aurelius structure. So it's a name. And then and these Aurelius structures are in a way self-healing, because they have a super complex unit cell. So they consist of 2 building blocks, like some standard kind of building blocks, but they are separate.
Did you say self-healing?
I said kind of a self-healing. We can say it as a self-healing.
So if I drop it on the floor, then they would still be they would be able to get, but this would be super useful for me because I'm very clumsy and I drop my phone at all times.
All right. So maybe it's not as macro scale. So the self-healing I'm talking about is still cool, very cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Electrically self-healing. So in these materials, there are 2 building blocks. Let's say the part that have like standard ferroelectrics have the crystal structure, and these are separated, and there is a layer in between, another kind of crystal structure. And the structure is highly charged, so it has a lot of electrons and like a lot of ionic charges. And then because this layer is there, it's kind of, whenever there is this effect of the defects, layer compensates this effect, contracts the negative effect of this imperfections in the crystal. So in a way, it kind of fixes the effect. So it kind of heals this electric fatigue in the structure. And these materials have actually no fatigue, so you can, use them like trillions and so many times, and then they still are functioning. So they are pretty cool because they kind of solve a problem of ferroelectrics. We talked about how great are they, and so these materials are great, but there's one hard thing about them, because the structure is very complex. It's very hard for us to make a film out of them, or grow them nicely.
Right.
So my research lies in there, or not only grow, but also controlling the polarization, because they are very complex. They tend to, do their own thing, and then we cannot really control them. And then so my research is about, having this control over this Arrhenius compound, and then seeing the polarization and the controlling it or engineering it in a nice way. So what I do in the lab is that we have this technique. It's called second harmonic generation. I'm not going to go into details, but basically we have a laser that we shoot the material that is growing. And when this material is ferroelectric or polar, let's say, it emits some kind of wavelength. It emits half of the wavelength of what we send. And then when we detect that, we can understand what's happening to the polarization while we are growing the film. That's very cool, because usually if we don't have this, it's kind of a black box. We have our growth chamber, we don't know what's happening, we grow something, but we characterize only afterwards. So if we don't see it while we are actually making the material, we cannot control it very well. But in our lab, we can see it by using these fancy optics and lasers, and so and then once we can see it, then I can say, okay, all right, so now, for example, the polarization is increasing, and then it's decreases sharply and then increases, so I can directly see what is happening to the polarization. So what we have been able to do in the lab was resolving the polarization dynamics of this material, and seeing for the first time that it has a two-step behavior. So that actually is impossible to record at the end of the growth. So you need to see it during the growth. And then we were able to capture that. And once we see that, then we engineered it. So we added some other materials inside. Actually, the one that I mentioned, bismuth iron oxide, bismuth ferrite, in the crystal. And then we achieved the perfect crystal quality that looks like a naturally grown, or like a nature grown material, but with a different characteristics. So what we did was getting some cool property from this bismuth ferrite and putting it in this self-healing framework, so that we would have a net polarization that is, not having any fatigue and not degrading. So this was for the first time that actually we were able to do such a thing, and then see how does this evolve and how we can engineer it. And that's why, to me, it's still interesting and very exciting. And I think the more exciting part is that it worked. So we saw that now we can insert different materials within this framework. So now what we're gonna do is adding whatever functionality we want, adding some magnetism inside, maybe some superconducting material inside, and then, creating all these different polarizations.
Oh, wow. That is so cool. That is so cool. But now you told everyone the secret, or what your future plans are. Now everyone else is going to jump on the bandwagon and take your ideas and do it, which is awesome for the research part of science. But this is really cool. Oh, wow. Almost self-healing. I need to remember that. Almost.
It's a self-healing effect, we can say.
Self-healing effect, yes. Self-healing tendencies.
Yes.
Something like that. Oh, wow. That is so cool. I totally understand why you picked this project as the one that, let's go with one of the projects that you're proud of. Yeah, not we are not playing favorites here, but well, we kind of are. You just did, ha. So it's very clear to me, Ipek, that you really enjoy the research aspect of being a scientist, like going in the lab, doing the experiments, and like data analysis and everything. What else do you like about being a scientist?
I think being a scientist is very cool in different ways. Like, so depending on, like, for example, for a PhD student, depending on where do you do it, you can have a lot of teaching duties, or, you know, you can be really together with students. And I really enjoy that part. So I like supervising students and doing some teaching. And I think that adds a lot to my life, to, you know, have always some fresh mind and fresh blood and soul, like, coming and changing. I think that is very nice. And what I also enjoy about being scientists is, like, especially material scientists. I think with material scientists, we have like a more or less a rough idea about most of the stuff around us. I really like, you know, looking at things around me, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is a metal, and this can be that, this can be this. So, like, making some kind of hypotheses and stuff. So I like the awareness, or, you know, it's, being a scientist makes me a bit more mindful to around me and what's going on around me, and it's like all this stuff happening in the nature and so, and that's very nice. I like it. I also like that. I think being a scientist teaches you how to learn stuff, and also how to get the information, and, you know, like, how to find the reliable information. So I like all these aspects of being a scientist. I think it's a great life.
That is so cool. That is really, really cool. Yeah, absolutely. Especially I love working with students. They are so cool. They just come up with so many cool ideas and such fresh perspective. It's like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about it. But this is really, really cool. That's awesome. So, Ipek, it sounds to me that your research experience has been wonderful so far, or you're just sharing the highlights with me. If you had 3 wishes to improve your research experience, what would you ask for? And I'm not promising anything, okay?
Yes. Yeah, I feel like I cannot complain in general about my research life. It's going pretty all right and pretty enjoyable. But of course, I guess everything can be improved. And I guess for me, the first part would be a bit more, you know, I guess as a scientist, we should talk to each other more. So, you know, like, I'm in a small field of ferroelectrics. I communicate my research, you know, in the conferences and in other ways. But usually, I'm also exposed on like this part of the science, and basically, I rarely have, and, you know, some talk with biologists, for example, or even like other scientists. And I think as scientists, at least, I would like to have a bit more, you know, interdisciplinary aspect of it, because I think it would bring a lot of creativity and a lot of creative ideas to, you know, solve some challenges. So I think to improve my research experience, I would love to be, you know, or like, usually it's easy to say, you know, yeah, let's do some like collaboration and interdisciplinary, but most of the researchers are in such a kind of a rush, or, you know, this pressure of getting stuff out in their own field, including myself. They might neglect actually to talk to other scientists. So I think that would improve my research very well in a way that it would make it much more creative, to communicate with different like fields, let's say, not only even natural sciences, like even, you know, human sciences would be super useful. And I think another thing would be, I think we should also really emphasize science communication with public, because it is very important. And most of the time, the research is funded by public funds. But on top of that, it's just important to, you know, communicate and like encourage the public to think critically, and then, you know the facts, the nature of facts around us, and so and I think that is very important. But it's usually also what I see, like, it's getting much better for sure. Like, science communication is getting more and more highlighted, and like getting more aspect and spotlight. But I think we should do a better job there. Like we should communicate our research to the public more and have these discussions with the public more. And I think it is always very beneficial to actually talk about your research to someone who has no clue about it, because it makes you realize, oh, actually I don't understand this part very well. I need to look that, or like, okay, maybe it is like this. So it's very useful for both sides. So we should do it more. And I think it should be, really encouraged by the institutions, that should be a default thing that we do, like communicate most of the time, oftenly. And the third time is, I guess, I would love to have a bit more free time dedicated to, some crazy projects, because sometimes I feel like the research funds can be tight. So you have a limited duration of your proposal that you need to get some results on. So you really work on that proposal and nothing else, and that project and nothing else. But I guess it would be cool to have, like a half day or a 1 day or something to do something totally maybe unrelated to your project, but still an interest to you, and then work on that kind of projects. I think that would also bring a lot of creativity in the work.
Absolutely.
That's the 3 wishes I have. They're a bit hard, but it's not possible, not impossible.
Nothing is impossible, right? And the first thing is to put your wishes out there in the world, and then see how they are coming to life, to whatever extent they are. But no, all of this makes sense, like the interdisciplinary communicating science to the public, not just because it's like the taxpayer money, it's also because the public is interested.
Yeah, totally.
They are interested in knowing what are we doing in the lab, and they are interested. They just don't know where to find the information, so they don't have access, or they don't know how to read the research papers or so, and how many research papers are they going to read. So if I may say, Under the Microscope is a very good step in that direction. And
totally. Congratulations for this. I really admire everyone working on the public science communication, because it's usually always as a hobby or a side job, so that it always puts extra effort and extra dedication. And what you're doing is great. Again, congratulations.
Thank you. I didn't mean, I actually meant it the other way around, that you coming on the podcast is already, you're walking the talk.
This is like a two-sided activity.
Absolutely. This is so cool. So Ipek, it has been wonderful speaking with you. But before I let you go, I want to ask you, as part of featuring on Under the Microscope as a material scientist, you also get the keys to the Real Scientist Nano Twitter account for a week or 2 or longer. What can the followers expect, the Twitter followers expect, in the week that you're taking over the Real Scientist Nano Twitter account? Tell me.
Yeah, so I guess first I'm going to introduce myself to them and who am I and what am I doing. And I think they can expect a lot of stuff about Ferroelectrics. So it will be like Ferroelectrics under the spotlight. So I'm going to share, the latest news and what has been improved and what is the future aspects of Ferroelectrics. And I think I'm going to share how my day in a lab passes through, because maybe it can inspire somebody or so. And then maybe I'm going to talk about the techniques that I use. So we have some fancy lasers, and so it can be interesting. And yeah, I guess then I am going to also talk about ETH and being a student at the Department of Materials, and the highlight of the research in my group, so people can get a bit more familiar with the field. Yeah, I guess that's more or less my plans.
Okay, that sounds really cool. I cannot wait to take a lab tour with you when you are taking over the Twitter account, also the campus. And please show us the coffee machine as well.
We have a very nice coffee machine.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. I've at least I can see it, but yeah, do show us your fancy lasers and everything else, and do show us your lab, your campus, everything. That sounds really cool. Thank you, Ipek, for taking the time speaking with me. This has been wonderful, and cannot wait to follow your tweets on Real Scientist Nano. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me here. I really enjoyed talking with you, and yeah, I can't wait to share as well. Thanks a lot lot. That's a great opportunity, and that's a great work you're doing.